Welcome back to Proximum, everybody, and today we're going to be doing a Craftworld Eldar Advanced Tactics video on what I like to call the Ranger Rush. So this is a subscriber-inspired video. They posted this idea as a comment on one of my videos, and I thought it was a really good idea, and I wanted to kind of flesh this out and explain it to you guys and show you how it worked, because I think it's an absolutely fantastic tactic. So what we're going to be doing in this video is we're going to be looking at what is the Ranger Rush. We're going to be taking a quick look at the secondary objectives you need to make it work. We're going to be looking at the units needed to pull it off, useful upgrades to make the tactic more effective, how to implement and set up the Ranger Rush in your games, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how to do that. And in addition, I'm going to show you one inclusion to make the most out of all three of your secondary objectives. So what is the Ranger Rush exactly? So the Ranger Rush is a tactic to get a unit or two of Rangers in the enemy deployment zone safely and quickly so you can max out your victory points from the Scout the Enemy secondary objective. So as you guys know, it can be a little tricky to get a unit of Rangers by itself into the enemy deployment zone to score those extra points on Scout the Enemy. However, with this tactic, it'll make it a lot easier. And at the same time, the units in the enemy deployment zone will also contribute and max out the behind the enemy lines secondary objective. So not only are you going to be scoring on Scout the Enemy, but you're also going to be scoring on behind enemy lines. So before we go into the actual tactic, I want to review really quick the Scout the Enemy and behind enemy lines secondary objectives for you guys, just to remind you guys of how they work. So Scout the Enemy basically is when you select one Azuriani unit from your army, and as long as they are outside of your own deployment zone and not within 6 inches of it, you score 2 victory points when just outside your deployment zone and 4 victory points for being within your opponent's deployment zone. Also, the action finishes at the end of turn for Ranger units and next round for all other units. So Ranger units do in fact finish this much faster. Behind enemy lines, on the other hand, is basically when you have a friendly unit in the enemy deployment zone. You score 2 victory points at the end of your turn and 4 victory points if you have 2 or more units in their deployment zone at the end of your turn. So very good way of getting some quick victory points, and is probably one of the better Eldar secondary objectives. So what exactly do you need to pull this off? Well, you need at least 2 units of Rangers, 5-man units is preferable, 1 Wave Serpent, and that's at the minimum. Now, at its base level, this is only a 275-point investment, and this can net you easily 30 points if you're able to pull it off correctly. And there are a couple of useful upgrades you can also take to make the tactic more effective. Wire Weave Nets can buy you another turn if your opponent tries to shut the Rangers down in close combat. And Star Engines can help the Wave Serpent get into your opponent's deployment zone faster so that it can start scoring much quicker. So how do we implement and set up the Ranger Rush? So here's what we're going to do. There's 3 steps to this tactic. The first step is deploy your Wave Serpent on a flank with the Rangers inside the Wave Serpent. You have 2 units inside there, which should easily fit the Rangers. Step 2 is you advance with the Wave Serpent at full speed turn 1 to get into or near the enemy deployment zone. With Star Engines and Strands of Fate, you could be advancing 25 inches. Which probably won't get you fully into the enemy deployment zone, but it'll get you close enough and it'll give you some wiggle room so that you can either hide behind a piece of terrain or stay out of range of enemy units. Step 3 is during your next turn, you disembark the Rangers and start scoring on the Scout the Enemy and behind enemy lines secondary objectives. So in this first example here, I have positioned my Wave Serpent on one of the far flanks, and I have moved it the full distance up to the enemy's deployment zone. So you can see it's just tipping over the edge of the deployment zone. So depending on how the board is set up and what deployment type you pick, this could be different, but typically you're not going to be able to fully get at least 2 units in the enemy deployment zone using this tactic. Probably just the Wave Serpent max, because you won't be able to disembark the Rangers yet. But as you can see in this example, I got myself into a position where I was safe from enemy shooting on the left-hand side of the board. And in most cases, you're also going to want to clear out the side that you're on. Typically, this will be the weaker side of the enemy board where your opponent will have less concentration of enemy forces, so you'll be able to sweep them off rather easily, and they won't present much of a threat to you after that. On turn 2, the Rangers disembark, move out, preferably within some cover, and start scoring on the scout the enemy secondary objective. You also now have 3 units in the enemy deployment zone, which gives you some wiggle room with behind enemy lines so that you can score the full 4 points on that. So every turn that these guys survive, you will be scoring 8 points, and that will max out your points at 30 within a couple of turns. Basically, the remainder of the game, you'll be at max score. So in the 4 turns of the game that are left, you'll score 8 victory points a turn. 8 times 4 is 32, right? So you'll have the maxed out number of victory points that you would be able to get from these 2 objectives. So that's a pretty awesome idea, right? 2 units of Rangers using a Wave Serpent is not something many people think about because they don't really benefit a lot from a Wave Serpent in general, but when using this, they can benefit greatly and score you a lot of victory points. Now, there is one additional inclusion I would like to make to this to make the most out of all 3 of your secondary objectives. So this is also to include 2 Warlock Skyrunners or 1 Warlock Skyrunner and 1 Warlock on foot, and give one of them Quicken and Restrain. Typically, you would want to cast this on the Skyrunner, so you would probably want to either give it to the Warlock on foot or one of the Skyrunners. And basically what you do with this tactic is you move these guys up with the Rangers, and then one of the Skyrunners can move into a position in the following turns to use the Psychic Interrogation or Warp Ritual secondary objective, and then the other Warlock that remained behind can cast Quicken, pulling the Skyrunner back to safety, and because both of these are characters, they won't really be able to easily be targeted when near the Rangers and Wave Serpent. So this is a great way to get at least 12 to 15 points on Psychic secondary objectives as well. So this is what it would look like. Basically, those 2 oblong shakes you see there in front of the Wave Serpent Rangers are the jet bikes. And one moves forward 16 inches, scores on a Psychic secondary objective, whether that be Psychic Interrogation or whether that be Warp Ritual. And then the other Warlock who stayed behind will still be within 18 inches to cast Quicken and move that Warlock back into safety behind or in terrain. So in conclusion, the Ranger Rush I believe is a fantastic way to score on secondary objectives for a low point investment, which is sometimes more difficult for Craftworld Eldar to pull off. And you can additionally add a few Warlock Skyrunners or a Warlock Skyrunner and a Warlock on foot to the Ranger Rush to score additional points on Psychic secondary objectives while remaining safe via the Quicken Psychic power to pull that Warlock back into safety once they're done performing their Psychic actions. And combined, this could easily net you 42 to 45 victory points depending on which secondary objective you use. If you use Warp Ritual, unfortunately, that's a max of 12 points, so you won't be able to score the full 45, but if you do in Psychic Interrogation and you're able to actually use that 4 or 5 times, this can also net you the max amount of points. And I can't really take credit for this idea myself. It's not an idea that I personally had. This was an idea of one of my subscribers, frequently comments on a lot of my videos, Nick the Noodle, and I basically credit him with the idea for this because he was the one who suggested it under one of my Wave Serpent videos. And also Neil Tweed, who's another subscriber who had insight on that secondary objective tactic that I showed you guys just now, where you have 2 Warlock Skyrunners or a Warlock on foot and a Warlock Skyrunner, and one of them casts Quicken on the Warlock who performs Psychic secondaries so that that Warlock can be brought back to the safety of terrain. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. Thank you for the subscribers who inspired this video. Really appreciate it. If any of you have any other cool ideas that you want to share, maybe it'll be turned into a video. I'm always open to new ideas, and I always want to give you guys credit for your work and your thoughts. So let me know in the comments if you do have some cool ideas, or shoot me an email, and I'll be able to take a look at those and see if they would fit in one of my videos. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today. I will see you guys later. I know this is a quick video, but hopefully we wrap up the week with something cool with this video that will help you in your games this weekend. All right, peace out, everybody. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.